Just when you think the travel industry can't get any more trickier, we have Mother Nature entering the conversation. And yes, we are at the beginning of hurricane season, but we are also facing unprecedented heat and lack of rain in Europe. And oh my goodness, let's talk about it.
This is the Art of Selling Travel Podcast. And here to guide you through it all, your host, Glenda Beagle.
Okay, if you are dealing with river cruises in Europe and the lack of water, or simply wanting to, and you're not sure what to do, let's all collectively start by taking a breath. Just simply take a breath. And there's a few reasons for that. And the first one is that some clients are still traveling. There are still river cruises going out every single day. Are they sailing completely effortless, gliding down the rivers? No. They're definitely going to be switching ships. Some of it's going to be moved into more of a land type tour. There's other things that are happening, but I want to be clear that there are still some passengers continuing with these trips. And it's very possible your clients may still choose to travel. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you've prepared them. Are they first off, are they comparing this experience to something else they've already experienced? So, for example, if they are seasoned river cruisers, they already know what to expect. So, in which case, that experience is going to be vastly different. If, however, you have clients that are previous coach, like guided vacation clients, this is going to lean a little bit more into that sort of feel. However, depending on the itinerary, depending on this, that, the other, they may still have extended days where they're still on board the ship. So it's your role as the travel professional. You want to make sure that you're stepping into that professional role to educate them, to let them know what are their options. Do they have the option to cancel? Do they have the option to postpone? Do they have the option to continue? And there's a possibility of compensation. We're going to get to compensation in a moment here, but it's also to educate them. What is this going to look like realistically? The reality is the majority of the cruise lines are capable of handling this in ways that we can't even quite comprehend, simply because they know what they're doing. This isn't the first time this has happened. It's not going to be the last time. But what it is something that they have contingency plans for. They have entire teams and departments that are going to be set up and prepared to be able to take this on. So how do you talk about it with clients that are looking to go in the future? Now, maybe we're talking about clients that want to go this year or that are already booked for this year or next, or clients that are wanting to look in the future. So first and foremost, Mother Nature, she's in charge. And just like, as I said, I started off, we're in hurricane season. We are into spaces where Mother Nature is in control. If it was winter, I'm from Alberta. It is not uncommon for airports to close. There's so many things that Mother Nature controls, and this is one of them. And a drought can just as quickly or just as impactfully become a flood. For example, in our town, I think it was like mid-March, they started sending us notifications. Like, it's still full winter, and we were already getting notifications to prepare for water restrictions, because based on the last couple of years of usage, the lake from which they pull all the water for our community, the lake levels were down significantly. They provided us with maps to show us how deep it was. They provided photography. There's a local photographer that goes out and does drone footage and showed every year for the last however many. And then something happened. In May, somebody turned on the taps. And I'm not talking about like an actual tap that goes into the lake, but I'm talking about how the clouds opened up, and through the last bit of May and into middle of June, we got about 19 inches of water. I'm recording this on August 21st, and there's farms in our area that are still dramatically impacted. And no, and the farmers know they're probably not getting certain crops off because there's no way the equipment can go into those areas because it still has too much water 2 months later. It is absolutely ridiculous. Do you want to know what nobody's talking about right now? Nobody's talking about water restrictions. Why? Because just as big of a conversation as it was in March, it is so much not a conversation right now. Now, that being said, it becomes this same sort of thing. My parents were booked years ago. I had them booked on the Mississippi, on the upper Mississippi. It got canceled due to lack of water. And then the following year, they were booked and it got canceled because it was too much water. So there is such a thing as anytime you are dealing where Mother Nature is in charge, you have to abide by the rules that Mother Nature has created. So, more the overall, and what I'm trying to say is because rivers, they're a smaller body of water, they're a little bit more fluctuating than what the ocean as a whole is. Trust me, the ocean is going up and down just the same. But because it's so much larger, you don't really notice it the same way. And therefore, the ships are able to sail. Now, over years, you see certain things get relocated and whatnot. But for the rivers, it's a much bigger impact because you're dealing with a much smaller body of water. And so I say all this to say that in the long run of things, we definitely have more good years than we have bad. And I think it's important to not hit the panic button because I'm definitely seeing some travel advisors hit the panic button. And when you hit the panic button, it makes room for your clients to hit the panic button. And ultimately, we just need everybody to take a breath. First thing I really want to point out, of course, is that we're talking about an entirely different price point. When you are in river cruising, this is a vastly different price point than what we're talking about on a cheap vacation to all inclusive or like to a 3-star in Mexico kind of thing. Or even if we're comparing it to guided vacations, it is a different price point than that. Part of that, of course, is the concept that it should be seamless, but it's also the level of inclusion. So we're not necessarily comparing an apple to an apple. We are definitely doing apples and grapefruits or something like that. And so we need to not avoid their concerns. And whether we're talking about clients that are currently booked or clients that are looking to book, we don't want to avoid their concerns, but we also don't want to add new ones. We want to have open and honest conversations about the current situations. And at the same time, too, not fearmonger and put in ideas and thoughts and other such that shouldn't be there. Talk about it conversationally. And yet at the same time, also add in relative comparisons. So, similar to like what I was saying, I think sometimes the rivers in Europe get a really bad rap because for the majority of passengers that are sailing, or at least the majority of the advisors to which I'm exposed, we're primarily North America. Yes, I have people that listen to the podcast. Maybe you're one of them. In Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Africa, like we have clients all around the world. And so it's how do you connect this to something relevant to your area? Again, I was chatting with somebody locally here and they were, what do we do? What, like, should we go on a river cruise? Should we not? And other such. So I simply used the conversation about our water restrictions because they were very aware of what that looked like and then how quickly it changed. Now, I'm not saying it's going to change that quickly. That being said, even within this last week, there's been a little bit of rain coming to Budapest area, and it's affected and changed a little bit of that too. Mother Nature can change on a dime. I am not promising that she will. I am just simply saying that it is possible. We want to make sure that in addition to not adding to their concerns is that we're not creating new ones that they haven't even thought of. Yes, you definitely want to make sure that a river cruise client knows that rivers are always subject to fluctuations, always subject to water adjustment levels, and that there could be some impact based on that. We also want to be mindful of your responses. Your role as the professional, if we're going to go fall in on this Mother Nature, is that you need to be the calm in the eye of the storm.
Right.
You need to be what keeps everybody else calm and chill and relaxed. It's also really important to remember that how you talk about your river cruise now, how you talk about it today, is going to impact your sales tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. I think it's really easy, if you will, to get wrapped up in, okay, this is really important. This is really like, we got to talk about this, and almost join the rage bait conversation rather than looking at what is the future impact? What is the future conversations that need to be had? Because there's a lot of people. I actually made a comment uh, earlier. I think it was actually earlier today. I made a comment to the group about travel and some of the obstacles and struggles. I said, like, like, after all, like, river cruise. And they all looked at me like I had three heads. And I just said to them, I said, Europe's experiencing like an extreme heat wave. They said, yeah. I said, so the water levels have impacted because a lot of the ships aren't moving the way they used to. They're like, oh, I had no idea. I've always wanted to go on a river cruise. And then it started that conversation. And here's the thing is that prior to me saying that, that particular group of people had not paid attention. Why? Because it wasn't in their current frame of reference. And yet they have this, oh, I want to do that. Wait, now that you've said that, is that something like, and I say that because a friend of mine sent a blog to a group of us and asked for our opinion. And I read it. And this is one that their consortia had put on their website for them. And I said, wow, it's sure not designed to get sales. And she said, I agree. Like, it's very much not. She actually said, I think this is geared more towards travel advisors than it is clients. And I said, okay, yeah, I can definitely see that. I said, but more importantly to me, it's written by somebody who has a bias against river cruising. That's at least how it read, because one of the things that they repeated in there multiple times was they got to pay for their shiny new ships. And that to me should not be part of a consumer facing conversation. And there were other things that got put in there. It was like little jabs. And I thought, if I was a consumer reading this, I would be completely turned off, not only of this agency, but also of the industry. And so it's really important when you're looking at what kind of marketing do you want to put out? What kind of conversations do you want to have? You have two choices. You can be a part of going viral and having the clickbait and getting that immediate endorphin rush because you got to be really popular for a split second. Or you can choose to create marketing and content that's designed to position you as an expert, that's going to allow you to continue to sell these products down the road. Because again, people don't necessarily pay attention unless it captures their attention, and they don't necessarily remember all the facts. I was going to say it now. I'm not sure I should. Screw it. Politics is a really good example of that. There is a lot of people who have a lot of opinions about politics, not because they understand the full policy, but because they remember hearing half of one sentence that was in amongst a whole essay or in amongst whatever. And I'm not talking about one party versus the other. This is like universal. This is the thing all sides of politics gets, is that they hear one little clip, one little viral, and that becomes their new truth, their new reality, their new perception of how everything must be. Currently, in social media, there is a very large, well-watched trial going on where there is a conversation taking place, and then the conversation on social media has an entirely different person to be blamed for this. And again, there's other people I'm seeing that are like, you can't actually say that because that's defamation and there is no evidence. And then other people are saying, but there is evidence. Like, I'm not going to get into that. But what I'm saying though, is that people pay attention to the little things, and they may not remember later on, but instead they'll be like, wait, I remember hearing something about that. You can't trust river cruises, or river cruises are bad, or what was it? Like, no, that person doesn't recommend, like, you don't know what that specific nugget that they're going to pull out of there, But the other thing is when you get into that viral thing, it's usually with a different level of energy because it's not as prepared, for lack of a better term. And instead it's okay, so we got to talk about this because holy crap, you don't know, like, and that's where problems start to happen. Again, it's not about dealing with the today, it's about dealing with next week, next month, next year, the year after. So who are you creating this who are you creating this content for? Because content does have consequences. So being really clear, are you creating it for the ones that are already booked? In which case, make sure that you call them out in that content, be it in emails, be it in your social media, your blogs, your podcasts, whatever it is. Say, okay, if you are booked on a river cruise in 2026, this is what I need you to know. If you're thinking of booking or you're already booked for 2027, this is what you should be aware of, knowing full well that there is a very good possibility that even by the time we get into the end of fall, we could be in an entirely different situation. Or there's also a possibility this could persist, in which case your professional travel advisor, like myself, that's what you would say, is here to guide you to be able to help you to understand that. Now, another thing with it is that you want to be really clear on who it is that you're creating it for. Already booked versus considering booking. Those are two different conversations and should be treated as such. And more importantly, should be called out as such. Because if you're going to have a conversation with somebody who's already booked, you want to make sure that you're saying, okay, if you're already booked, pay attention. Because the ones that aren't already booked, they're not going to listen with the same level of intention. The ones that are looking to book, you're going to call them out. If you're looking to book your river cruise in 2027 or 2028, here's what you need to know about the 2026 drought. And then go into having that conversation. It allows you to be able to create separate conversations for a larger audience that you've segmented. And it allows them to be able to pay attention to the thing that's most important to them. Now, how is this also going to affect your future, the future years of sales? So again, one, if you have clients that are on the fence and they're like, oh no, like I'm going to go because it'll probably fix itself in 27 or 28, get them deposited. Why? Because there is a lot of people that are canceling in 26 that are now going to go in 27 or 28. And guess what? Space is filling up. What happens when space fills up? The prices go up. The other thing is it gets a lot harder, particularly if you have 2, 3, 6, 8, 10 couples that want to travel together. You want to get them in there because those ships are going to be a lot fuller. Future travel credits are being offered to a lot of clients, either one, like depending on the cruise line, because every cruise line has its own policy. And here's the deal. Every cruise line has its own policy. Do not have conversations with your clients that are booked on cruise line A about what cruise line B is doing. Because especially if A is not compensating to the level of B, why would you enter that into the conversation? If they bring that to you, then that's okay. That's a conversation to have. But I am seeing travel advisors who are saying, cruise line A only gave a 10% credit versus cruise line B gave a 30% and cruise line C gave a 50%. So I know what I'm going to do. And they're putting it in their flipping marketing, which means that consumers are seeing this. Advisors have a possibility of being able to keep the calm or to throw in the Molotov cocktail. You get to decide which one you want to be on. Now, I get it. Some people love to be the drama. And in some ways, I think travel industry is drama filled enough. I do not think we need to add anything else to it. But the way you talk about it today has consequences for tomorrow and beyond. Consequences can be good, but consequences quite often can also be bad. You get to choose which way that goes. So before you go to have a conversation about it, take a breath. Do not overpromise. That is really important too. Don't overpromise and say, for sure, it's going to be perfect in 2027. I don't have a crystal ball. You don't have a crystal ball. Although, if you do, I'm totally willing to go halfers because we could make a lot of money. Just saying. But don't overpromise and be truthful. The way I look at this, and I kind of wrote it out, you want to be truthful as if you were going on the stand at trial. Obviously, I've seen a lot about trials lately. You want to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And you only want to talk about what you are being asked about. You do not need to add in an entire essay or an entire novel about everything else. That's where, okay, so we're working with you. Cruise line A is offering you this. This is the one you're booked on. You do not need to bring in the conversation about cruise line B or the cruise line C or whatever it is. Or, that's so much better because I have other clients that didn't get this and I've seen this. And I get it. We want to share. We want to have communication. We want to have all of these other things. And at the same time, if it is not going to be helpful, impactful to your client, particularly in a positive way, unless not telling them is hiding truth that they need to know, you don't need to bring it into the conversation. I am going to link up in the show notes. I am going to say this for I did find one. Angela Hughes of Trips and Ships did a phenomenal YouTube all about kind of the logistics and more of the technical things that you need to know about the rivers and whatnot. And I think that was really well done. She did put it on her consumer page, which I think was one of the best consumer ones that I've seen because it was technical. It was very specific. It wasn't doomsday. I think there was still some room to be a little bit more upswing, but at the same time, I think it was beautifully done in comparison to some of the others that I've seen. I have seen travel advisors do YouTubes that are like, okay, river cruising is done. Now, I get it. If you don't want to sell river cruises, perfect. Put out that marketing. But if you are a river cruise expert and that's your bread and butter and that's where you are doing 90% of your business, do not use that as your marketing hook. It's not going to help. Again, that's where today's conversations give you tomorrow's consequences. So with that, come follow me over on social medias at Art of Selling Travel. I would love to continue this conversation there. And as always, I'll link it all up in the show notes. And until next time, happy selling.